Am I right in assuming you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome to day 41 of class. Today, we're going to finish the trips log app. I did get my, the one we had problems with yesterday, I got it to work, but I'll show you what I did, and it was a little weird. Then we're going to talk about the Chapter 13 bookstore app. Now, what I was going to do, and I don't know if it's a good idea or not, you're the only one who's here, so I guess I'll get your feelings on it. But I do want to go over the app. I think it's a good app. I think there's a lot of stuff in it. I think there's stuff in there that may help us down the road. That said, what I was thinking was swapping out their database and putting in our database instead. But looking at it, I don't know how big of a job that would be to do. And I don't know if we would just be basically kind of looking for disaster for lack of better words. So what I'm going to do, and I started doing it right before class, unfortunately, but I don't know if you all have access to that Chapter 13 site, but I'm going to throw it out there on a GitHub repo so you can look at it, and we're going to go over it. I think we're only going to spend today on it. Then tomorrow we're going to do something I had not planned on doing, but I think is a good idea. And that is, we're going to go in and Evan was good enough to share with me a database that he created last semester for the class. We're going to look at that database, but we're going to do it differently. What I mean is, we're going to grab the database, all right, that he's already created, and we're going to go the other way. In other words, instead of a code first database, we're going to do a database first database. And then we're going to create our models from that to see it go the other way. And then when we get done with that, we're going to talk LINQ. We talked LINQ in the AWD1115 class, but that was LINQ for straight C#. And we're going to talk tomorrow about LINQ and LINQ for using it with ASP.NET. So that's my plan. And then we'll see where we are at that time. All right. So with that said, all right, let me bring up the trip log. And this is the one that we were working with yesterday that I had the problems with, okay? I'm going to leave it up here so you can look at it, make sure you have everything. This is the weirdest file I have ever dealt with. And let me quickly explain why to you. When I came in and tried to put in this line of code by copying it from the other file, it didn't like it. But when I manually put it in, it didn't seem to have a problem with it. In the same way, what I did was I did the first one here, and then I copied it down to accommodation, to activity, and it didn't like that either. But when I went back again and manually typed it in, it didn't have a problem with it. So when I say manually typed it in, what I did was for example, I grabbed this. I copied it to the clipboard and I pasted it here. Then when I came back in and I changed it to accommodation, etc., it didn't seem to have a problem with it. But if you notice, I'm getting null references all over the place. All right. And I tried changing that in quite a few places and it didn't like it no matter where I tried to change it. So I just left it alone. All right. But what I'm telling you is I believe that if you want yours to work, and I know we all do, that you're going to have to put this at the top. All right. And you're going to have to make sure that these are all set as well. So I literally was going to leave this up here for literally just a minute or two, and I'll move it down. But while I'm doing that, and you have a chance to look at it, and so does everybody else who's in the class, I'll quickly go over and take that chapter 13 and put it out on GitHub and make it public. So just give me a second to do that. I'm going to leave this here, but I'm going to change the way we're looking at it. All right. And what I mean is we're going to come here. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to start sharing, and I'm going to share a window. And I'm going to share. So you should see the same window you saw before, but I should be able to change my window now. So can you tell me, I have changed my window. Can you still see the code on your window?
Yes, yeah, it
All
hasn't
right.
changed.
All right. So like I said, just give me a second. This literally should take me a matter of moments. All right, that's finished. So let me go back and change it back again. All right. So my screen should now be visible again, and I'll bring that down a little further. All right. And again, Grant, you may have this already, but I want to make sure everybody in the class does. So this was the the first half or so, about the first 50 lines. All right. And then it's almost repeated, but not quite, for the delete, which was down below that. And like I said, there's, I think, like 8 different warnings in here about nullable references. Now, if we run it, we're still going to have a problem because we still have 2 different view files that we have to add. And we can't add anything because those are the view files. But once I did all this and saved and ran it, it ran clean. And it comes up with the empty list. But again, when you go to add trip, that's where there's the problem. We have nothing in there. And when I click add trip, of course, it's looking for that add one, which we're going to create right now. So what's left to create is not at all astronomical. All right. But what we need to do is we need, like I said, we need to add these two files, those being add1 and add2. So underneath views, all right, underneath views, yesterday, no, we didn't make one. So home can be closed, manage can be closed rather, shared can be closed. But we need to add a new folder in here called trip. So under views, if you would please add a new folder and call it trip. And we're going to add into trip add1.cshtml and add2.cshtml. Now add1 is a little bigger. It's about 45 lines, and add2 is small. It's about half that. So we should be able to do that, within 15, 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to just close everything that I've got open. All right. And come in and make sure under trip, I'm going to add a new view. And the first one we will add will be called add1.cshtml. All right. As always, we'll start out by removing the stuff that's in there because we don't need it. Now I'm hoping I don't get the same kind of problem I had yesterday. So add model and then the trip view model. And you can see it's already doesn't like this. Okay. I didn't change that. It did. All right. Now it's giving me that error or an error. But again, this is when I did this before. I want to make sure I'm not going to copy it. But that's what I need. The using log2 models, view models, I think. log2.models.view models. Right. I believe it required the semicolon on the end. Let me double check that. Yep, it wanted it. All right. I think everything is spelled correctly, but I'm just going to keep going and hopefully that's going to work its way out. But regardless, we're going to put the code in here right now. So you can tell it's not pulling that in, that I still got that error right there, because otherwise the IntelliSense should be picking it up. And it's not, but I think if I do this, it's not, see, unexpected end of file following the modeling directive. All right, expected a type. Well, that is the right type, so I don't know what the problem is there. Now, I'm wondering if I save this and I do a build, see, everything that is giving me errors on is here. All right. But I was thinking that if I built it or rebuilt it, that it might fix it, and it's not. Unexpected into file, expected type, which, and it is a type. Double check, but I know that's how we spelled it. Trip view model, it's right there. All right, well, that's the first one. And I'm not going to copy anything. I'm just going to keep typing. So All right, that is the first one. Boy, oh boy. Okay, well, no, it took it. Whatever. All right, it took it. You can see it's blue now. I think I can remove that one. All right. I don't know. Are you caught up to me?
Yes, I think I am.
All right. Now, all I want to do is just do a build. Make sure it builds clean still, other than those warnings. It looks like it is. Now, even though it's not done, we still have one more page. All right. But now, when I click add, it's going someplace. Well, that's good news. All right. Now, for some reason, that button didn't get built right, so I screwed that up, but we'll fix that right now.
Mr. Scott, when you get a chance, could you? I have a null reference exception error coming through in my index.
All right.
That's the HTML file.
For manage or for what?
For home, I think.
For home. Okay. Well, let's take a look at it then.
It's line 22 on mine. Yeah, it's just that for each loop.
Do you have the using statement up on top?
I do.
And you've got the right model?
Yes.
Trying to think what would cause that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's keep going. When we take the break, if you want, you can post it. If you want to put it out there then, and I'll take a look at it during the break. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
It should have fixed it because I had the cancel button set up incorrectly on mine. So if I click add now, cancel should be a button. There it is. Okay. All right, so let's do the last one, which again is short. And this one is again under trip, and it's add to, excuse me, it's add to.cshtml. Model there, so I'll put it down here. So add model, trip view model. All right, so again, it's going to give me that same error. So using, well, I wish I had my head together today. Trip log 2 models view models. All right. It's probably, again, going to give me that error sooner or later, but you can notice that that's not changing color like it should for the using. So let's just finish this. There's only about 20 lines to type in here. And finally, I'm going to just go back here and grab those two buttons. Hmm. It isn't showing anything as being erroneous there, but my guess is that when I run this, yeah, I'm going to get an error, and it's going to be right there again. All right. I don't think it would help to copy the other one that actually is working. I don't think that would do it. Oh, I didn't put an at sign in front of it. Doggone it. That's what. Okay. All right. That appears to have fixed that. I don't see any other errors on here, so let me save it. Let me rebuild it. All right, it's giving me no errors. Let's try it and see if it works. All right, well, that's good. That is not coming in as a date picker, which isn't good. All right. Well, we don't have multiple items. Trip to St. Louis has been added. Okay. Or so it says, right? So let's see. That's working. Well, it says that it's been added, but it's not showing. That, of course, isn't good. Let's see if I stop the run and I start the run again. Still not showing. So let's see if I do this. I want to see if it's being added to the database. All right, so the destination, that's in there. Okay, the activities are in there. The accommodations are in there. So somewhere in there, I'm missing it where it's adding it to the trip. Right, the trip itself is not being added, so I must be missing some kind of a line. Well, that's up to me to go back through all my code to figure that out. The good news is it's running. I know yours isn't, but the good news is once we get yours fixed, that error fixed, hopefully it'll be running. You can add trips. Now let's see if I go back here. I add a trip. Let's manage destinations. See if we can add another for here, another accommodation. It's regarding these as though they're two different trips. I didn't think it was going to do that. Son of a gun. Well, there's more right with the program than there is wrong. So I'm going to have to go back, and I will, at the end of class today and take a look at everything that's in there because something is definitely missing. I don't know right now what it is. All right. What I did do, so you know, and I'm going to keep that up so I don't forget it. What I did do was I went back, and if you go out here to my GitHub repo, there is a CH13 bookstore Muroc, which should be public. All right, so I'd like you to please bring that up. And we're going to kind of step through some of the stuff that's in there because much different, especially in the models folder. If we go into the models area, folders now, data lake, domain models, DTDs, extension models, grid, and view models. Some of those are self-explanatory. As far as view models, I'd have to look. I would have to look under author here. Let's see. I'm not sure if that's set up exactly the way ours is set up. So I'd have to check author, and I'd have to check book, and I'd have to check book author, I guess. They've made a book author one in here, and I'd have to check genre, right, to see if they're the same as the ones we have. And like I said, that may be more trouble than it's worth. Now, what I want to do is we're going to go over all this in a second, but I want to run it. And it's giving me an error. And it says, let's see, what did they call their database here? They called it bookstore, so it says duplicate, DB context, etc. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and drop my bookstore. In fact, I'm not even going to do that. I'll just change this to bookstore 2. So this will be theirs. In fact, I'm going to call it bookstore Muroc, because I know I don't have anything like that. I'm going to save this and then come in using package manager. I shouldn't have to add a migration. I should just be able to do an update database on here. Of course not. All right, it failed. So let's see. What do we have here? Bookstore context. I'm looking for something that might be new. Let me come in and save it, because again, when this happens, they're saying it's a build error. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to do a build, rebuild solution. And it's given me all sorts of different errors, which is interesting because I ran it before and it ran just fine. Duplicate DB context attribute. The namespace bookstore models already contains a DTD. Or DTO, I should say. Well, let's do this. I'm not going to worry about it right now, but I want to talk about what's in here and kind of step through what's in the chapter. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you why I want to do this. All right. Ideally, at least, we'll all get this to work. All right. It'll work for everybody. Now, it's the author's example. I get that. That's okay. But chapter 14 in the book, which of course is the next chapter after the one we're going to start going over today, is on testing. And I think we should be able to use this example to go and run through some testing. That's at least my hope. All right, so I'm not sure what the problem is here. Like I said, you know what I've changed so far, which hasn't been much. All right, so the DTOs we talked about already. You'll notice there's extra ones. There's a cart and there's a cart item. The cart is the entire shopping cart. The cart item is each individual item that you're putting into the cart, all right, for an order. All right. We look under data layer here. You'll notice that now there are three different folders. There is a configuration folder, and I think you already know what that holds, but we're going to look at it anyway. All right. There is a repositories folder to hold our repositories, and there's a seed data folder. So in configuration, we've got our configure files for author, book, genre, and book author. Those are very similar in nature to what we did the other day. All right. Under the repositories, you'll notice that rather than writing just an iRepository and a repository like we did previously, now they have a book repository and an iBook repository. Okay. And their unit of work has been changed to an iBookstore unit of work and a bookstore unit of work. We're going to look at all this stuff because I want to go through what's in the chapter. Then in our seed data, as you can see, there's the author's seed data. Not a lot of surprises in there. There's the book author seed data. There's the book seed data. And there is the genre seed data. All right. All right. Then the other stuff, so to speak, that we have in here, all right, under data layer, notice we've got a book query options, a query extensions, a query options, all right? And let me just mention with some of this stuff, what the author has tried to create were more generic type of methods. What do I mean? Well, I think that we show like 10 books per page. And when you get more than that, it does pagination and it provides the equivalent of little buttons on the bottom where you can move from page to page. And it's written in such a way that it could be reused for other applications. All right. And that's set up like that for books. And it's set up like that, I believe, for authors. And I don't remember with genres. It looks like there's not enough to really paginate for genres. All right. They also have in here, like I said, these query extensions. What is that? That's what we're using in here for pagination. All right. And basically what this is doing in here is it's expecting we have a certain number of items we want per page. And it's checking. And once we get to the last item, all right, if we're adding books, for example, it'll put it on a new page. It'll also, like I said, basically come in there and help set that up. So it figures out how many of these buttons to put in so that we're able to sit and look and go from page to page. Here's our query options. Some of this is similar to what we looked at the other day. Some of it is not, like the has where, all right, the has order by, etc. But notice now there's a has paging in here as well. All right. So again, we're working still kind of with transactions or whatever you'd like to call that. All right. Then we've got DTOs. All right. And DTOs are data transfer objects. And if we look at these, all right, a lot of time when you are working with this, the reason that you use a DTO, and it may not be exactly relevant here, but the reason that you use a DTO is by default, SQL Server expects that when you run a link query, you want to get every bit of information back. So every field, no matter how many fields there are, no matter whether you want to use them or not use them. If you want to only get a subset of the fields that are available, you do what's called a projection. And with a projection, you basically add a select statement in there where you list the fields that you're looking for. With the queries that we've been doing thus far, the ones that we have been doing, we've been doing the equivalent of a select star from. All right. But here they're talking about that you don't have to do that. All right. Now, it's kind of weird as far as setting up grids and doing pagination and the like, because from what I understand, if we were to have done this program that's right here, rather than doing it as a C# ASP.NET web app, had we gone in and done it as a C# Forms app, like we did in the AWD 1100 class, all right, you get the pagination and stuff pretty much for free without having to do anything special. All right. But in here, that's not the case. You have to basically build it out yourselves. So that's what they're doing in here. All right. Then we've got extension methods, and it's meant to do just that. All right. So as it says, get a list of current objects, but a lot of times with extension methods, what you're doing is you're extending stuff that currently exists. What does that mean? That means, for example, if there was like a string method and you wanted it to do a little something that it wasn't currently doing, you could provide an extension method to do that. All right. The grid is what I already mentioned to you in here before. All right. And views. when we go up to controllers, notice that we have 4 different controllers. We've got an author controller. All right. And when you look in here, I mean, what's new? Well, notice the options we're setting. All right. But notice we've got page number and page size, which has been set someplace else in the program. All right. And we even have different ways that you can sort. What does that mean? That means for authors, you're going to see the first name and you're going to see the last name. And the first name and the last name will be hyperlinked. So if you click on the first name, it will automatically sort the authors in ascending order based on first name. If you click on it again, it changes it to the author's first name in descending order. And you can do the same thing with the last name. This is very similar to the way this stuff is set up with C# Windows Forms apps rather, with databases. It's pretty much the way that it is set up in there. All right, we've got a book controller. And again, it's much the same, that we're sorting it in certain ways. But the idea is this, and we'll look at this because I'm going to go back to the book after the break. But the idea is what we're going to end up having in here. All right, this is display. The stuff that's in here, controllers, etc. That's all display. And what I mean is that's what the end user is going to see. All right. The other thing that's in here, and you may or may not have noticed it, is we've got areas with admin, and admin has their own controllers, and admin has, in this case, their own models, and admin has their own views. Now, with the models that are in here, as you can see, all right, we've got a view model, but then what do we have? We've got an operation thing in here, as you can see, to add and delete. All right, and we've got a search in here that's going to do just that. All right, and we've got a validate, which is going to be similar to some of the stuff that we did before. Now, there's good news and there's bad news here. The good news here is this does correctly and successfully implement admin functions in this program. That's the good news. The bad news is anyone can still perform the admin functions because there is no register, there is no login. That's added to this example in chapter 16. All right. So it is 101. If you haven't done so already, Grant, please save that out, save what you're working on, and I will be happy to take a look at it. And after the break, we're going to go through what's in here. All right. Taking a look at it. All right. Very interesting because, like I said, it worked fine when I ran it yesterday. So, in fact, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try to bring it back in, see if I can get it to run.
Okay, I just pushed mine. What time are we coming back again?
115.
15. Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at yours right now, Grant, so just give me a second and we'll head back into the regular lecture.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to have to keep looking at it after class because I've looked through 3 of your files that could have been problems and they look the same as mine.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what, but I do have yours and I will look at it as soon as class ends today.
Okay,
Sorry
thank you.
about
I
that.
appreciate that.
No, that's not a problem. All right, what I did too during the break, I wanted to check something out, and that is, and don't worry, I'll share again. There we go. Um, let's see. I grabbed another copy and I want to see if that one is going to run or if it's not going to run. Now, as I do this right now, what I'm going to do is what I said I was going to do before, and that is 2 things. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove my bookstore database. Okay, so that's gone. Then I'm going to come in and go in through the NuGet Package Manager console and see now if it lets me do an update database or if it fails right away. Well, that succeeded. That's good. All right. It says it applied all that. Let's see if it's back. There it is. Just going to look at one table. It doesn't matter which one. I'll look at the books table. All right. So that looks like it's been populated. That's good. All right. Let me shrink this down and over.
Mr. Scott, what did you do to make the update database work? The first time I deleted mine, but my build failed on my update.
When the build failed, I go back and save everything and go back and do a build solution. Now, if you notice, this one worked. The good news is, looking at this, we'll be able to walk through it, hopefully, and talk about some of the stuff that's in here. All right. Now, this is their project. My hope was that we'd be able to do similar things, but for instance, make our own homepage here with our own logo and whatever. All right, our own coloring, etc., and use our own database so it looked a little bit more like ours. All right, what I hope to do, see, this weekend I want to do 2 things. I share something with you, nobody's business but my own, but my wife is going away this weekend with one daughter to visit another daughter who lives in another state. The reason I tell you that is, other than having to dog sit, I have nothing planned this weekend. So I want to do 2 things. I want to rewrite this and use our database, and I want to complete the project that we're going to be working on so we can start on that next week. All right. But you'll notice if I come in here, for instance, if I go to the shopping cart, it says I've got a book in here. I can remove it. As soon as I do, there was a badge in there that had how many things were in there, and that's gone. Plus, it says it's got the book name removed from cart. All right. Also, you may or may not have noticed when I go to home here, it's got Wuthering Heights. If I go to books and go back to home, it's got something different. So what's happening is it's picking a random book out of the titles that are there. All right. And you can click on it and you can click, for instance, you can go to the author page and find out all the books the author has written. All right. The only thing I don't like about what they have is right now there's no picture. That's why I provided on mine a picture for the book. And I was hoping, like I said, we could put all that stuff in. I don't know. I'm going to try it this weekend. If it doesn't look like it's too big of a thing to do, we'll work on it next week. Otherwise, we won't. And if it's too big a thing and I get it to work, I'll just give it to everybody, show you what I did. All right. So you'll notice this is the admin section over here, not the cart, but these two things. So I can go over here to admin and notice I can manage books. I can manage authors. I can manage genres. So I should be able to go in here, for example, under authors and add an author and put myself in. All right, save. All right. Now, when I go through here and look at my list of authors, I should be in here. And there I am. All right. Notice there's like J.K. Rowling is right there. If I edit and I go over there, that's the managing page. But I think they have a couple books in here. And I could do the same thing now. So I could add a book. All right. And you'll notice I could add a book that I've written. Okay. And I could give it a genre. All right. And notice there's even a multiple. So if I had multiple people who were writing the book with me, I guess I could do that. All right. Now, when I go to manage authors and I go to me, all right, and I edit, okay, I should say if I go to manage books, that should be in there now. See it, but it should be in there. How's that? All right. And genres are the same way. So it's kind of cool in that you can see this is all in the admin section. All right, books, authors, and genres. That's the good news. The bad news is this registration function hasn't been implemented, and it's not implemented until chapter 16. So again, my hope is sorry, internet issues, is what we'll be able to do is kind of meld the database we did into this project. And then in chapter 16, all right, add the authentication and authorization parts to it. And I think I've told you this already, but what's left is chapter 14, and that's on testing, chapter 15, and that's on creating your own tag helpers. We will do that. And chapter 6, which is on authorization and authentication. Now, when we start working on our own project, ideally next week, but when we do, I'm not going to bring everything in here that's been in the book. All right. And if you say, what do you mean? Especially some of the stuff on the end, like when I built it, I didn't do anything with repositories and whatever. That's not saying we can't add that stuff. All right. Okay. Enough. Let's just take a look at what's in the book then. All right. So you see what this looks like right now. So that's the admin page. If I go back to the home page, and here's what you and I would see as end users. All right. So I'm wondering if I go to 8 here It looks like it's in alphabetic order. And I don't know if the book I did was put in here or not. It doesn't look like it was. And I don't know why, but it doesn't look like it was. All right, because I thought it was called Haunted House, but whatever. All right. This is what you and I would see. So we can add a book to the cart. Okay. We can, now there should be a book in there. We can go to our cart. All right. We can come in and do this, but what I'm doing in the project that we'll have is all that same functionality, plus you'll have a button over here. So if you want to add, so let's say you wanted to give 3 of these books and I wanted to do this as a gift. Well, right now I got to go into edit. It's not a problem, but I can go in here and then say change it to 3. And you'll notice it immediately price. Okay, this is what we're going to have. All right. All right. It'll be a mini shopping cart app and it will work to a point. All right. I don't know if I'm going to have time to even go in and look at Stripe or PayPal to try to put that in it, but it would be cool to do that. So let's see. All right. So in your textbook, and I was looking at this before class, so let me go back again. All right. Now, you all have access to this bookstore website. What do I mean by that? I'm not going to run through the steps, but if you go out to Muroc's site, muroc.com, you can get your own copy of this particular application. It's the one I also put out there on the system. Why did that one not work and this one I just did work? I don't know. All right. But they're even mentioning in here that they don't show every bit of code in this chapter because it would just be too much. That's why you can download the project. So if we look at how it's broken up into here, all right, we have the user interface and the folder structure. I've kind of gone over the interface with you already. We'll look at the structure. We have somewhat looked at it already. It's by far the most expansive. It's the largest thing we've looked at. All right, I tried to show you both the end user and the admin user pages. All right, we'll look as they show in the book at the folders. Now, then they mention general purpose code, and this is kind of what I mentioned before. You'll notice it's got extension methods, and then the other two in front of them say generic. And it's generic, so the idea behind this is reuse. All right. Okay. Then they go into explaining how they're going to do paging and sorting on the authors. And as I mentioned to you before, you can go in and you can sort by author's first name or last name, etc. I didn't show you that, but just so you see it. Again, I'm just trying to be a little bit complete here. So where are we? I don't know. I got to, the one that's not working, I got to throw out and keep this one. But if you look at it, so if I come in here and I go to authors, all right, it's in alphabetic order right now based on the author's first name. If I click again, now it's in descending order. If I do it last name, same kind of thing. All right, I don't think there's nothing set up for books. All right, but you can do it in ascending or descending order. All right. There we go. Okay. So again, there's paging for the author, there's paging for the book, and then they go through the cart page. Now, is this a real working e-commerce application? The answer technically is no, because what it does not do is it doesn't keep track of how many books there currently are in stock. All right. And we'll do some of that stuff in the example that we're doing. That's where I'm struggling a little bit in the example that we're going to go through in class. All right. But as it says rather extension methods for sessions and cookies. Then there's the admin area. So I want to try taking a look between now and let's say for maybe an hour from now, I don't know. But I would like to go and take a look at what's in this chapter and what's in this application. All right. Now, they go through a lot of stuff that, in my opinion, for whatever that is worth or not worth, that we really don't even need to talk in here. So I want to hit the stuff that, in my opinion, is the most important for us to take a look at. So when we look in here, we've looked at this now. I already explained this to you. There's nothing new. Now, you are able to, in a couple different places, I believe, you are able to go and add something to the cart. Is it adding it to the cart? Yes, it is. Is it actually decrementing rather the amount that's in stock for that book? The answer is no. All right. And ours probably won't do that either. The project we'll do in class. All right. And it's too hard to do that because it puts in too many other things that you have to worry about in the database. All right. So those are those pages. And again, then they talk about the admin pages. Now, we've looked at admin before. We've done some work with admin before. To my knowledge, everything that we've done previously with admin, we have added either to controllers and or we've added to views and we've made our own layout file, but we have not added anything into models, and this one does. All right. Now, again, they go through here and they talk about what comes up by default, etc. That's not really, again, that important a stuff. They say they use bootstrap classes, and yes, they did. All right. So again, when the admin page displays, it brings up manage book by default. It contains a link where you can click to add a book or a drop down where you can work with an existing book and then either edit it or delete it. So again, right here, this is the main page that comes up, and this is the stuff you can do. This isn't really new from what we've looked at before. It is kind of nice they put a tab control in here so that we're able to go back and forth between books and authors and genres from right here. But there's add a book, and again, when we bring this up to edit, okay, or we can, if we wanted to delete that book, we could do that as well. So like I said, I don't know if you agree with this or you understand even, but it's kind of a quasi real working application. All right. That's the way I'm looking at it in here. All right. Then they go through the folders and the files. Now, here is the structure. So you'll notice this is the non-admin area right here. Everything they're showing is non-admin. All right. But what they're going to try to do in here, and hopefully you can see it from looking here and from what we went over already. I mentioned this the other day. They're trying to give you a thin client and a fat model. All right. The advantage of doing that is in a model view controller application. The idea is the controller's job is twofold. It's to get whatever data needs to be gotten, all right, from the model, all right? And it gets whatever data is necessary from the view, all right? And really, when you think about it, that is the idea behind it. However, what we've been doing this entire semester is we've been putting sometimes almost all, but at least some of our business logic, we've been putting it in the controller. All right. Not always and not all of it, but by and large, we put quite a bit in there. So again, the idea is we're going to be the controller and fattening up the model. All right. Now, you have to be careful when you fatten up a model, and that's why they set it up kind of the way they did in here. In fact, when you look right here, that whole thing that you see in here, that's all the model. So again, as you've already heard, we've got what? We've got a data layers folder, we've got a domain models folder, an extension methods folder, a grid folder, and a view model folder. So the idea is we're trying to take like stuff, push it together, and give it its own folder, for lack of better words. Now, the domain models folder, you already know this rather. It contains the classes, the ones that describe the entity that the app uses. In other words, what does it have in it? Well, what you think? Books, authors, genres, and now again, we're adding to that cart and cart item. All right. Now, not every one of these is necessarily going to become an entity class that's going to be used by Entity Framework, okay, to create the actual database. We don't have to worry about that. We've seen this before where we have added a few classes to our models folder that didn't become part of the database. All right. All right. You'll notice in there, we've also got, as you see in there, we've got the DTOs. The DTOs folder, their data transfer object is what a DTO stands for. All right. And as the name suggests, they're used to transfer data. All right. Now we've worked with view models. All right. And view models got their name because they're associated with views. On the other hand, a DTO or a data transfer object is more general purpose in nature. All right. It's used to transfer data back and forth through different parts of the application, not necessarily just to a view. Now, the bookstore app uses DTOs to store data in session state or in cookies, for example. All right. We've got that extension methods folder. All right. And it's going to do, again, a lot of generic type of things. It'll add extension methods to the string class. It's going to add a custom list of cart item objects, and it's going to work with session and cookie objects. In addition, what's going to be in there is going to be that grid folder, and that's going to contain the classes that the website uses to create tables, really grids, all right, of data. And that's what's going to display for us the author information, book information, okay? The view models folder, you already know this. It has the classes that hold the data needed by the views, all right? So like I said, not really a whole heck of a lot in there. So we've now looked at the domain models, the extension, and the view models. All right. We've also got this data layer, which is pretty big. And again, it has our configuration files in it. You already know what those are. All right. And basically, they either hold the seed data or they hold the way the seed data will be configured. All right. And we've got the repositories in there, which again are designed to allow us to work with transactions, to be able to do multiple operations on an as needed type of basis. All right. Okay. What's shown next then in here? These are the admin folders. All right. So you'll notice in here, so there's the views. I guess that's from the last one, but this is the admin area right here. And again, this is similar in nature to stuff we've worked with before. All right. And you'll notice when we look in here, we have what? We've got a controllers folder. All right. We've got a models folder. All right. And you'll notice that that models folder doesn't have any new classes in it as far as this book view model and the validate are not going to be, they're not going to be used to create new tables. All right. They're going to be used so that we're able to do the validation stuff, and that the only people who will have access to that validation stuff will be people after chapter 16 who are in there and who are registered as administrators. Okay. All right. So again, the models folder doesn't contain many files. All right. Because what's going to happen is the regular models folder is going to do most of the work that we need. All right. It does contain two classes, the book view model, and that's going to hold data that's needed by the view. All right. And the validate class for more remote validation like we've been doing lately. All right. All right. As we just peruse and make our way through here, and all I'm doing, I want you to understand something. This particular example is more extensive than the example we're going to work on together as a class, and you will eventually modify so that it'll be your own e-commerce application. I wanted to go through this because, again, in my opinion, we hopefully will be able to use this in chapter 14 and look at a little bit of testing in chapter at our chapter 16, where we will go in and actually add the working administrative capability to this. All right. So as it says here, let's just take a look at what's shown here on the next page. All right. So you can see this starts with string extensions. Well, the first one that's in there is not exactly new. All right. It's slug. All right. But the idea in there, when you think about it, it's quite possible that an author's last name could have different kinds of characters in it. Now, one common character, we're going to keep those in here. But other characters they could have would be things like an apostrophe, etc. So this slug thing is designed to go in and remove, all right, all punctuation characters except for the hyphen. All right. But it replaces spaces with dashes, and it converts all the characters that are in there to lowercase. Then we've got another one here that says equal no case. Well, the reason that that can be important is, all right, what we're saying is sometimes when you compare things, they are case sensitive. So we're doing the best we can here to make anything like this that we're doing case insensitive. You may or may not remember, but back from the AWD 1100 class, the C# class, we did some of this stuff. All right. Where we went in and you were able to make case insensitive comparisons. All right. Now, they do mention in the book, fortunately, this method doesn't work with EF core queries. All right. So for those, you have to use a standard equality operator. and the two lower. So there's a little bit more work that has to be done. All right. Then there's a to int method. Again, this should look at least somewhat familiar from what we talked about back in our days of the AWD 1100 class, because we did try parses. All right. And remember, when you do this, all right, you need an out value that you want it to go into. Okay. And this is what you're trying to parse, and either it's going to fail or it's going to succeed. Now, typically when we did this, we did it almost based around a try catch or something like that. All right. But what this is going to do is it's going to attempt to convert a string to an integer. Okay. And if it fails, if it can't do it, it's going to give you the default value, which is 0. All right. The capitalized method takes the first character of the string and uppercases it and makes everything else lowercase. All right. Not exactly a title case, but more that idea. All right. Then there's the generic query options class. All right. And you'll notice it's similar to what we did before, not identical. There's more things added. But one of the things that's in there, before we just had an order by, now we have an order by direction. And as you already saw, that's what's going to let us either order it in ascending or descending order. And you'll notice that we're defaulting it there to ascending. So when it first comes up for the authors, when it first comes up for the books, etc., it'll be in ascending order. All right. In addition to that, all right, we're adding the page number stuff that's in there. Now that page number stuff is going to work with other parts of the program, as you probably guess. And they even mention hidden here on the bottom of the page, where the author says, the method for strings make it easier to perform different kinds of tasks. You can read those yourselves. All right. And again, this version adds an order by direction that allows you to do it in either order. All right. The next thing that's in there is the generic repository class that's right here. Now in chapter 12, we did this for the first time. And one of the things that we were told in the book was that this took the code that interacts with the database and it encapsulates it. And what do we mean by encapsulate? Again, it kind of hides it. And we talked about this before. I mentioned interface versus implementation to you. All right. And the fact is that if I know how to use something, I don't need to know inherently how it works to do what it's going to do. All right. Now there's more features and more functionality in here too. We look and you can see the stuff in here that's mustard colored. All right. One of the things you'll notice when you start going through here is right at the top. All right. It adds a public read-only count property. All right. That's going to return the value by the count method that we're going to use. And that'll determine how many links we're going to have. So in other words, if we say 10 books per page and we've got 75 books, that the number of links then will be 8. All right, 7, which will have 10 in each, 1, which will have 5 in each. All right. It adds a get method in here, and it's an overloaded get method that has a string parameter. All right. And it's again going to sit there and work with the find method that's in here. All right. There's a build query, which is something new. And as it says, it accepts a query options object and it uses it to build a query expression. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in here, but this is going to help when we do the to list function, when we want a listing of everything that's in here. All right. the build query method that we're going to end up using has options for sorting, all right, more than what we had in chapter 12. Kind of said that already. In chapter 12, the repository class implemented the iRepository interface, and so does this one. All right. Okay. Next, they talk about the paging and sorting on the author. Some of this is kind of review, but again, just so you see it right there. And as we already mentioned, that when you use ASP.NET web forms, you get paging and sorting out of the box. You may remember that, you may not. But one of the things that we had were those links that, that got added by default. All right. That would do things basically like sorting and stuff for you. But here we're building our own, rolling our own, whatever. All right. So again, these first two columns are set up. They're all hyperlinked, as you can see. What does that mean? That means these right here, you can go to an author page by clicking on here, clicking on here. You can go to that books page by clicking on here. All right, nothing exactly new there. But again, what's new, as we talked about, is if you click on that heading, you get it in order, ascending order based on author first name. Click again on ascend or descending order author first name, and the same kinds of things for the last name. Now, they do mention in the book too that for this to work, you got to add a custom route. Okay. And what it does is it specifies, we kind of looked at this stuff before. All right. So when you set this up, what you'll notice in here, all right, is we've got, I mean, there's a lot. All right. Control action, page, then the page number, size. Right now, I don't believe that this particular application gives you the chance to actually change the size. So in other words, if a user wanted more or less books or authors or genres or whatever on a page than you provide, you'd have to add some more code in there in order to do that. And again, sorting the fields you want to sort on and ascending or descending. And that's pretty much what they mentioned in here too. Again, not a whole heck of a lot right there that's new. Now, as far as that data grid class, okay, that's in here. And again, they make it abstract and they write it in a very generic type of manner. All right. The methods that are in there are virtually general purpose methods that more than anything else are going to allow you to go in and allow you to paginate and allow you to sort. So as mentioned, all of this stuff is working together. All right. Now there'll be defaults that'll be given in here, as you can see, for 3 of the 4 properties that are in here. It'll by default set the page number to 1, set the page size to 4. I guess you could change it probably right there. Set the sort direction to 8. There is no sort field by default. But you should hopefully be able to look at this. And I'm not saying it's going to 100% make sense. All right. But at least hopefully what's happening in here makes some sense. The set, sort, and direction method that's in here, the first method, it determines the sort order. All right. Then there's a clone method in here. And that clone method returns a copy of the current object. There's a toDictionary method in here as well. Someplace it might be low later on in the page. I don't remember. All right. It returns the value of each one of those 4 properties using that string dictionary type of thing. All right. So that's it in a nutshell. But then they open it up and they say, okay, the author list view model and the author controller. So what's happening in here? All right. The author list view model uses the three properties that are shown right there: authors, author data, and total pages to store the data that a view needs to display the grid of authors, to be able to paginate, and again, to be able to sort. All right. And as you can see, what is it? Well, we've got authors, which is a list of authors. All right. We've got the grid data, which is what they just have been building. All right. And they've got the total number of pages that are in there, again, for pagination. Then when we look at the controller that's in here, all right, some of it looks similar and some of it does not. All right. Notice private repository author data get set. This is what we started to do yesterday when we started to kind of change the way that this is set up, because in the past we'd always said private, our the not a name of a repository, but the name of our context, and then we just called it CTX, or I should say context. Then in here we set it to CTX. We're doing the same kind of thing, but in a more generic manner. All right. Should be basic all of our authors in this case. All right. And I mean, they explain in the book kind of what's going on. Do I get it? Overall, I get what's happening. They're basically setting it up so they're able to display everything. All right. And they mention on the bottom of the page here, the list action, as it says, accepts an author data grid data object and uses its paging and sorting to create the list. It creates a view model with the author name and paging data on it. So it's pretty simplistic. As far as the author list view, which is discussed next, all right, it's a strongly typed view because we've got the at model at the beginning. All right, then that at model is an instance of the author list view model class. All right, then we got our typical kind of razor stuff in here, so there's nothing new there. What is new is right here. All right, it creates an author grid variable that it's called current, and a grid data variable named routes. All right, and that's going to be used to build back with some of the stuff that we looked at earlier. All right, the paging and sorting of the book, it's going to be pretty much as far as what goes on in here. Again, you're working with other things because it's a book and not an author, but as far as what's going on here, okay? And you'll notice again, I believe it's just title in here. Might be, I don't think it's title and author. I think it's just title that you can click on in here and put it in order based on title, ascending or descending order. And you'll notice that from here, as it says, you can add a book to a cart, to your cart from here as well. All right. So as mentioned on the bottom of the page here, displays 4 books at a time, provides links as necessary. In the grid, as it says, the user can sort books in ACE. Well, I'm wrong. So it's not only is there a link here, but there's links for genre and there's links for price too. All right. All right. Some of this stuff, I don't know if it pays to go over, but like they talk about the book data, grid data subclass. And again, that's how they're going to build that. All right. Then the book list view model, and the book controller. All right. And when you take a look in here, again, the list action here is very similar to what we just saw for authors, but rather than it had setting up a grid, an author grid, it's setting up a book grid. All right. there's a details action method in here. So if you do click on one of the books, you get a book object passed back to the details view. All right, again, nothing exactly new in there. All right. And here's the list view. It's pretty big, to be honest with you. It goes in your book over like about 2 or 3 pages. All right. Again, you can see it's, or you can if you go on to the next page. It's a strongly typed view. All right. And again, we're coming in here and we're just like before we did with the authors. We're doing the same kind of thing in here. And we're setting it up so that it's able to allow us to view all of our entries, all right, in our books table. And it's pretty big too. All right, then finally they go through the cart stuff, and I shouldn't say finally, but they go through the cart stuff. So the bookstore site, as it says, has a shopping cart, all right, and it says it keeps track of books the user has selected every time they click the add to cart button. And if they chose the wrong book and remove it, it's no big thing. And as says there, or said there, it uses session state to store books during the user's session. All right. So if I do go in here, and let's say that I go back to here and I run the program again. And as of right now, I don't know if I have anything in my cart. I've got one book. Let's put Rebecca in there too. All right, so we'll add that. So we've got 2 books now that are in here. If we look at our cart, there they are. All right, now I'm going to close this. I'm going to totally close the program. All right, so I'm out of Visual Studio. Okay, that was the old copy that didn't work. So let's bring this up again. And let's run it again once it stops spinning. And you'll notice that persisted. All right, so we have a persistent cookie in there. Okay. All right. The next section that's in the book is probably the biggest in the chapter, and it talks about the cart. And it's, again, it's the biggest because we haven't dealt with that before. All right. So again, it does keep track. It does do a certain amount of things. Now let's just look on here where it says this. It says the bookstore website uses extension methods to make it easier to work with complex objects in sessions and cookies. So they show 3 of them there on this next page. And as it says, and I'm taking this out of the book, the first example adds 2 extension methods to the iSession interface. All right. It serializes the object and then stores the associated string in session state. All right. That's the set. And then the get reverses it, of course, and it grabs it and basically gives you the object when it's done. Then it adds 3 extension methods, all right, to the iRequest cookies collection and interfaces. Again, these are designed to make it easier to work with cookies. So they're not exactly the same, but the idea behind these are similar. Again, you are coming up with things to try to make it easier for somebody to use something. As far as the interface, you already saw this, so there's nothing new here, but I've mentioned this to you before. We have both a cart and a cart item. Now the cart really won't change very much. The cart item will be changing possibly on a very often basis. And you'll notice for the cart item, what do we have in there? Well, that's something new. Book, DTO, book. So the cart uses a DTO, as they mentioned down later on the page, to store book data in session states. It says that's because trying to store it in session can become circular. Right? What that means is sometimes if you click on something that requires something else, if you don't watch what you're doing, that second thing can go back and require the first. You can get yourself into almost the equivalent of an infinite loop. All right. So they show the DTOs in here. And again, this stuff is pretty doggone heavy. And that's why, like I said, I'm trying to take what's in here, and I'm not going to say simplify it. I don't mean that, because that would almost sound derogatory to all of you. All right. But I'm trying to put it in a way when we do our project that makes sense to everybody. And believe me, it may or may not show when we do this. I'll make you a bet I've spent 100 hours on this. All right. And I'm not exaggerating. Okay. I've spent a lot of time trying to get this to work. All right. And finally, let's take a look at the admin area. And again, not a lot of new stuff in here as far as we've talked about most of the stuff that's in here already. All right. So you'll notice, all right, when we look in here, we've got this repository. Okay. And what else do we have as far as what's adding, add update authors? Well, hopefully what's in there makes sense. All right. So this is going to handle first displaying all the authors for you. And if you want to do an update, you can click on one of them in question, and then there'll be an associated edit button. All right. If you want to add a new author, there will be a link to do that as well. And basically, again, that's all shown in here. And if I go up a page, all right. Oops, I went too far. Sorry. It's there. All right. There's your edit, and there's your add. All right. And if we keep going, as it says, here is your view that goes along with this. All right. Now, I asked you yesterday, Grant, if you thought this class was a little harder or the last class was a little harder. And believe it or not, I actually gave that some thought over the last 2 days. And I've come to the conclusion, you may or may not agree, which is fine, that the stuff that's in here can go off into so many different directions where we can work with something and then not work with it for a while, and then it'll come back again and we work with it again. I don't believe that this working in here is as intuitive as working with the MERN stack. All right, for whatever that is or is not worth. Okay, so in the admin area itself, okay, they mention in here, there is an iBook repository interface. Notice what it says. It adds a method for working with related author data. Well, remember, I believe at least it's possible to have an author that has more, I'm sorry, a book that has more than one author. All right. One thing I don't think they've implemented in here, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they did. Technically, it's also possible for a book to have more than one genre. But again, I don't think they put that in here. Now, with this related books, if we move up a little bit here, all right, notice a view when the user tries to delete an author that has books, can't delete it because they have related books. So we're trying to delete Agatha Christie, but she still has books. we've seen this kind of thing before. All right. So again, the admin area, as they mentioned on the page here, it has add, edit, and delete forms for books, authors, and genres. But if you try to delete an author or a genre that has either, that has books related to it, you're going to get the error message and it's not going to work. Right. All right. And finally, as it says, the deleted and related actions that are in here, and I'll let you take a read on that yourselves. So that's going over it, but it's going over it quickly. Like I said, my goal is to go back and try to massage our database into this and let us work with it. If I cannot do that, we'll just work with this one. And I hope to be able to work with this one and have it work for chapter 14 so we can do a little bit of testing, chapter 15 so we can add a tag helper, and chapter 16 so we can add a working administration area to it. All right. Now, what I'm going to do, not this second, because I've got to look through my stuff, but I found a really good article on Link, all right, that I wanted to share with you. Unfortunately, I didn't save it, so I'm going to look for it in just a moment. All right. And I'm going to send it to you. And I'm going to ask that you try to read that tomorrow, because what we're going to do tomorrow is basically twofold. We're going to, again, take an existing database that Evan has given to me, and we're going to use the database first. And it's almost remarkably easy. There's just going to be basically a command that we have to put in from the package manager console, and that'll create the model classes for us. Then we're going to take that database and run a bunch of link queries against it. And the reason for that is I want you to see, and there's been some link stuff we've talked about. There's been some link stuff we talked about in the AWD1100 class, but there's been some link stuff that's in here. In other words, in this class that we have not yet talked about. All right. So Grant, what I'm going to do as soon as I finish here is I've got I'm going to bring your program up right away. And if I find an error, I'll try to solve it. And what I'm doing, just so you know, all right, is I took out just this project. All right. So if I send it back to you, that's all that's going to be in it. All right. And just as a note for you and really everybody else in the class, if you're going to send me something to look at, it's if you take it out and put it, copy it into its own folder and put that into your repo. All right, because otherwise, if I forget, I've got some of these repos that people send me are several gigs, and when I have too many of them out there, if I forget to delete them, it slows my machine down quite a bit. This is a 7-year-old machine. All right. And supposedly I was supposed to get another one last year and I didn't. So I'm not complaining, just telling you. All right. That's all I've got then. Again, we're going to do some link stuff tomorrow. We'll see where we are at that time. Friday will be lab. It's even possible. So will Thursday, because those people in this class who are behind, you know who you are. If you don't, go out and take a look on Inside Rankin, but that'll give you some time to catch up because your chapters 10, 11, and 12 stuff is due this coming weekend. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, you too.